Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the All In podcast. I'm your host, Eli Cooper. I'm here with my co-host, Mike Badzik. How's it going today, man?
It's going very good. Thank you for asking. We are very excited for our mega NBA preview that we're doing today leading into the NBA COVID bubble. We're super excited about this one.
Yeah, man. NBA is finally back. By the time you guys hear this, games will be playing tonight. We have the kickoff of the Lakers and Clippers, so the Battle of LA, and Pelicans and Jazz playing as well right before them. So two pretty intriguing games. All these games, again, are important. These are seeding games coming into it. But before we get too deep into it, as you can see if you're watching on video, but those of you tuning into audio, we have a special guest who is back. It's been a while. My guy, Todd Fetzko. How's it going, man?
It's going great, guys. Not on the road this week, but in the spirit of basketball being back, I had to bring out the 2019 IUP PSAC champs right here, baby.
IUP. That's what I like to hear. IUP.
I'm repping.
A little bit of a flex. As a former PSAC member, that hurts a little bit, but we'll just skate around that. So just to give you guys a little gauge on the format of how we're going to do this one with so many teams playing, and to kind of help you guys find it on YouTube, we're going to break it up into 3 tiers. We have our top title contenders, which we'll start off with, which will be the Lakers, Bucks, and Celtics, and then we'll get into
Clippers.
I'm sorry, Lakers, Bucks, and Clippers, are the tier 1 teams. And then we'll get into the tier 2 and tier 3 teams. That way you can find your favorite NBA team and what we discussed about them. So let's just dive right into the top tier teams. We'll give a little preview on each of them. Obviously, each team getting 8 games. Lakers don't have much to do, so we'll start there to lock up the number 1 seed. I believe, let me pull them up here. They have a 5.5 game lead over the Clippers for the number 1 seed, which they can essentially lock up within the first couple of games, especially if they win on open night. They can get this pretty much locked up. So I think so far all 3 of us have the Lakers winning it all. But what's important, at least in these seeding games that you guys are looking for, going into the playoffs? What do you think, Todd?
I think some of the biggest things I'm looking for is shooting. So, these guys' legs, is playing fast, like someone like the Rockets or whoever, the Mavs, like kind of that 3 ball. Are those people's legs? Are they going to have their legs under them? Are they going to sustain that for, a couple of days in a row? I think shooting's going to be really important. And then just feel when we come back. I think, we've had like this pseudo preseason, but I think still getting that chemistry back is going to be a big thing. And the teams that can catch that the quickest are going to have the big advantage.
Yeah, and the new guys for the Lakers, I think, is the biggest question. Like J.R. Smith specifically, like which J.R. Smith are we going to get, and how productive is he going to be? Like at some point, he's probably going to have to make at least one big shot. Like I don't know if he's going to get a game-winning shot, but like down the stretch in a couple of these games in the playoffs, he's probably going to have to hit a couple of big shots. So probably in the restart, you're watching like, okay, how do they use him? Like, what minutes is he playing? Who is he staggered with on the court? Like, I'm assuming that they're going to have him out there with Bron a lot. I would think that would be the guy that they feel most comfortable him being out there with. But then, like, if he's out there with Bron, well, then like, who's the primary ball handler and scorers when Bron's not on the court? Like, I think that there's more questions about the Lakers right now than the Clippers for sure. I think. I'm leaning Lakers because of LeBron and AD, and I just think that those 2 are better than any other 2 combo, including Kawhi and Paul George probably. But, like, when you look at the team around them, I think there is a lot of question marks. And Rondo's out, Bradley's out. Like, there's a lot that we don't know about this team that we feel we know so much about because they were so dominant in the regular season. But it's really a whole nother ball game, right? And this is something that we've talked about before, Coop. Like, these guys had 4 months off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's an entire off season. Like, how many times do we see teams at the end of a season one year, like they come to the season next year, same guys a lot of the time, or maybe slightly different 1 or 2 pieces, like we're seeing here, and it's a totally different team. So we don't know. So how are these pieces gonna mesh? J.R. Smith's the biggest one, I think. Probably. Todd, would you agree? J.R. Smith, like What's your feel for JR? What do you
I
think?
think Dion. Well,
Yeah.
let me say, I think J.R. Smith's going to be huge. But honestly, I think watching Dion, I think like you talked about when LeBron's off the court,
Yeah.
I think down the road a little bit, I could see them trusting Dion to kind of go out there, get some buckets and some time when LeBron's on the bench. And I think for me, I trust JR enough that if he stands in the corner and, they're going to, stop him from dribbling and doing some nut shit. But like, I think, I think Dion for me is the biggest question mark. Can he come in and kind of provide those buckets when they get stale and LeBron's maybe not in there, or they just need something late shot clock? I think if he can step up and, kind of be that motor when they need something for him, I think that could be the huge difference.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, I think we kind of know, right, what we're going to get out of J.R. Smith. I don't think his role is going to change much. Waiters, I think, is the wild card or kind of the X factor, because if he can step up and be a consistent, secondary off the bench playmaker for them, that's huge. Like, because that's the thing that honestly they were missing before they signed him. You know what I mean? Even before Rondo was hurt, they didn't have another like perimeter guard who could consistently create his own shot. Problem is Dion Waiters has never been like super consistent. So, and maybe don't
Stay away from the gummies.
Yeah. So, those are the kind of things that you worry about with Dion Waiters. And it's the fact that he's being put into this role is actually kind of important. I think probably before the trade deadline, I think the Lakers should have searched a little bit harder to find somebody who could play that role a little more consistently. But I don't know. We'll see what kind of shape Dion's in and, how well he can play in that role for the Lakers. Because I think that's like the only thing that I can really see holding them back from winning it all would be, not having that additional, scorer or playmaker when LeBron's not on the floor. Are
you worried about defense at all, Todd? Or are you worried about defense at all with Bradley going out, Rondo going out? You match up with some of these guards. I mean, LeBron, it looks like he's been better this year. I think typically he'll step it up in high leverage playoff situations. AD's obviously a force. And they got those, big guys in the middle with Dwight and JaVale. Are you worried about the defense at all?
So if like the Clippers, for example, if they were smaller, the top level teams like we're talking about right now, that would worry me. If, they're going against the Warriors, whatever it might be, then I'm worried. But I think the size of the Lakers, and I think they can throw enough bodies at some guards that in the end of it, I think that they'll still come out on top. They might get some problems in maybe another game in a series or so, but I think the fact that what we're really talking about is, can the Lakers beat the Clippers or the Bucks? I think in the end, that size will come to help them more, and they can deal with some of these lower seeded teams.
And I agree, because I agree wholeheartedly, because the two other teams in this tier are not like small guard led. You know what I mean? Like if they were playing the Warriors, you'd certainly be concerned about Steph Curry, against this Lakers team. But no, the two teams that are the biggest threat to them are forward, based teams. You can, and they match up well with them. You can put LeBron on Kawhi, and I don't really know who they plan on putting on Paul George, but they have options. You know what I mean? They don't have a.
Yeah, but is LeBron on Kawhi like?
It's not ideal.
I don't know if that's because LeBron in the playoffs in the past, like even when they played the Warriors in the finals, I think Richard Jefferson was guarding Kevin Durant more than LeBron was.
Yeah, and I think JR can kind of step up here. JR is, I know it's been some time, but his last, 2016 in Cleveland, he was their best perimeter defender, and we can see if he can bring, something, almost to that level. I think that at least that's a look. They got the Morris twin. I think that even Caruso's 6'4", 6'5". So I mean, he can throw him on in spurts, and we'll see. But I mean, that's definitely. I think, like you said, Mike, they have a lot of question marks and a lot of things they're going to have to figure out quickly.
Yeah. So, the matchups don't look great. And I don't think, LeBron is guarding Kawhi for a majority of the game. In crunch time, I think, is normally when he'll step up and, take on this kind of big assignments, kind of like he did before the season shut down. So, that's where we'll see him guarding Kawhi, which is when it's most important, to be honest.
Yeah.
And
Is Markieff Morris there?
Yeah, he just got back.
Yep.
He should probably be guarding Kawhi, I would think, in a lot of moments, right?
Yeah, it'll be a multitude of defenders because you never really, as superstar players, you never want to throw one defender at them or one type of, you know what I mean, defensive read. As you see, like all the time, those guys get multiple defenders on them.
And Kuz has stepped up, I think, on defense this year too. I mean, he's been better than years past, and I think at least he's a bigger body you can put on.
Yeah, so they certainly have options. I'm not too concerned about the defense. It's when late in games, if their offense stalls, who's going to be the creator other than LeBron? Because sometimes LeBron needs a secondary like perimeter scorer, like a D-Wade or a Kyrie, like he's had in his career. He doesn't have that now. Now his secondary scorer is like a big guy. So that's just going to be interesting to see how that dynamic works out.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Clippers a little bit here. They've had some, I don't want to call it chemistry issues, but they've had some concerns, right, to open up the bubble. Obviously, the Lou Will going to Magic City was not not a great start. And I get it. The wings are great from what I hear. I've never been there myself, but apparently they have good enough wings to sit out 2 games for. So,
Did you hear Marv Albert? Did you hear Marv Albert on the call yesterday? He was doing the one game, and he was like, "We need to order some of these wings from Magic City up here from Atlanta."
Oh my god!
Yeah, I mean, it's just
not a great look for the
not a good look at all. And honestly, even if I don't believe him that he was just there for the wings, I'm sure he got some. But even if that was the case, because if that was the case, he would have just had someone else go get it, right? Like that would have just been the logical thing.
You would think so, yeah.
Yeah. So it is what it is. But 2 games isn't bad for them. They don't. Again, they're not playing for a ton. Technically, they could drop to the 3rd seed, but I don't necessarily see that happening. And really, that doesn't necessarily matter for them. But how do we feel about the Clippers? Obviously a lot of people feel they're the most complete team as far as their structure, but all 3 of us are picking the Lakers for some reason. So we'll start with Mike. What doubts do you have about the Clippers?
Well, I think they've only had their core group of guys play like 11 games together the whole year. So I think that matters at least for something. As far as chemistry, I know everybody's taking 4 months off, so the chemistry might not be there, at all for some teams, and maybe it's the ramp up, and maybe these preseason type games are going to help with that. But I don't know, like that seems to be a thing, right? Like playing with guys consistently for an extended amount of period of time. Like I would think that would matter. Now listen, Lou Will's going to miss some games there, and I wouldn't be super confident in. Okay, well, if we fall to the 3 seed, who cares? I mean, because they're probably going to have to face Houston if they do fall to the 3 seed. And I don't know, like Houston, like we're going to talk about them, but like I think that they could be a matchup problem for a couple of people. Just the way they play is different, so different that it just in itself creates a matchup problem. So I'm a little bit worried about that. Now, what you said is true. I think they are the most complete team. If you looked at their roster 1 through 8 or 9, you probably say, okay, I might take these 7 or 8 guys over anybody else. Maybe the Lakers, maybe the Bucks, maybe the Raptors, just on a depth perception. But listen, like I think Kawhi is still probably the most respected guy who's going to be just coming off of last year. When you think about like, okay, who do I want on my team in the playoffs? We had this debate on a different podcast, and me and Todd took Kawhi because he still has the ability to just lock down on defense. I think that's the bigger question is too, like, are Kawhi and Paul George going to take a step up on defense in the playoffs? Because in the regular season, like, they played pretty good defense. They were good, they were okay, but like they weren't playoff defending like they might be in the playoffs. So we'll see, like, if they do match up with Harden and Russ in the first round, like, we'll see, like, are they going to turn it up? And I think that would be a big indicator going forward. With, okay, this is what they did in the first round. It looks like these guys have taken it up a notch on defense. And it looks like Paul George isn't playoff P where he's, airballing and having his struggles. Like, I think that's a big indicator, right? So I hope for them. Now that's the thing, that those are question marks that I think won't be answered until at least after the first round of the playoffs, right? So if I'm them, I'm like, I don't want to see Houston in the first round of the playoffs because I want to answer these questions against somebody I feel more comfortable against. Give me Dallas. And Dallas is nice with Luka and KP, and we're going to talk about them, of course, too. But I think I'd much rather face them in the first round, work out some kinks that I might feel like are lingering, and then go into Houston or Denver and go from there. But I don't know, man. The Clippers, like, I don't know if this chemistry stuff matters with everyone being off, and I don't know if the Lou Will stuff matters that much. He's going to miss a couple of the games, but I don't know, man. Like, I think if you held a gun to my head, I might take the Clippers over the Lakers, just because of the fact that I'm like, okay, well, look at this 1 through 8, not as many question marks, but I still would take the Lakers now without a gun to my head, thinking the upside of if you get a LeBron and AD team clicking in the playoffs, I think it's better than the Kawhi and Paul George. But I think if you're going for the safe bet, I might take the Clippers.
What you think, Todd? How you feel about the Clippers?
So for me, the Clippers, like we said, like they're obviously a complete team, and that the Kawhi Paul George combination that's a scary line to look at. But I think the difference, like we talked about, like what's the difference between the Lakers and the Clippers here? I think that I love Trez. Trez is my sixth man of the year, but I think the Lakers, I think the AD is such a problem. I think he can create such havoc for the Clippers specifically, and like Mike said, I think the top power of those two, LeBron and AD together, I think are going to be more of a factor than Paul George and Kawhi linking up. And, Paul George has had his whatever in the playoffs, some issues before, and not that AD hasn't, but I think that size that the Lakers have is going to be a real problem for the Clippers. But let me just say, I hope they don't drop to the 3 because I need that LA Western Conference Finals. I need that in my life. But no, I do. I love the Clippers. Yeah, they should. I love what the Clippers can do, though. I mean, the fact that they can clamp up. When they want, they are going to clamp you up for stretches, and you're going to feel them. And so I think in the end, like they just have that, like Kawhi, especially in a playoff setting, is going to be able to get his shot off every time. He's going to be able to control the pace, and he can be able to lock up your best player, and let alone they got another 6'8", 6'9" dude that they can throw on you too. So I think this team is scary good. I think that Lou Will so far in the bubble has been, he was lighting it up before this happened. So I think, after he gets back, I think he can be a real X factor in a playoff setting. He can get hot any game. He can win you something. And I think that, the Clippers shouldn't have too many problems getting in there to the Western Conference Finals.
Agreed. And like Mike said, my biggest concern about the Clippers is, they haven't played with their core together a ton. Guys have been out with banged up injuries and resting and things like that. So that's my biggest concern. And they have 8 games to kind of write that out, really 6, because Lou Williams is gonna miss 2. So, and maybe their first round. But like you said, Todd, the other thing that concerns me is just kind of how they match up with the Lakers down low. I think that's probably the one weak spot, that the Clippers have, because these two teams are like oppositely constructed. If you really look at it, Clippers are a smaller, like more interchangeable team. Like defensively, they can switch. They can put a lineup out there that can switch 1 through 5, stuff like that. Whereas the Lakers are kind of, a little bit old-fashioned with a bigger, stronger, more physical team. And when you look at playoff basketball and the game slowing down, I can see Anthony Davis giving them huge problems because they don't really have anyone who matches up well with him. So when the game slows down, maybe they don't even need, a perimeter. The Lakers don't need a perimeter like scorer or playmaker. Maybe they dump it down to AD and they kind of, play off him, from mid-post area. So, those are the kind of things that concern me about the Clippers is their lack of being able to match up with them. Plus, Lakers have a lot of rim protection, and the Clippers aren't like a sharpshooting team offensively, even though they're a smaller team. They've got guys who can make outside shots, but they're not, necessarily the Warriors. So, when they have to go into the paint and they're attacking AD and Dwight and JaVale at the rim, that could also be a problem for them. So, I guess those would be my only concerns. But when you look at it on paper, it certainly looks like, well, the Clippers kind of have everything that you need to win a title when you look at it from that perspective. So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see. I certainly see them in the Western Conference Finals. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't get there. But it's really that how they match up with the Lakers is going to be interesting to see whose style dominates.
Yeah.
Them.
And I actually do have another concern about the Clippers, though, because, I think in the playoffs, like, we get in this sometimes, like, the last 5 minutes of games are they're almost hard to watch sometimes because it's just like, I guess depending on your point of view, it's hard to watch. Sometimes it's fun to watch depending on the players involved, but it's like, all right, here we go. 5 minutes left. It's a 2-point game. Give the ball to this guy, clear out, pick and roll. Let's do this for 5 straight minutes, which, like, I get really annoyed with because I'm like, run a freaking set. Like, come on. Yeah. Like, you run sets all game because they work, and then you stop in the last 3 minutes of the game. So, whatever. That's a whole different conversation. But the rest of the game, when I think running sets are really important, the Clippers have Kawhi, Paul George, Lou Will, Marcus Morris, all documented ball stoppers, which I think are total, like, those are my worst pet peeves is ball stoppers. Like, I think that those are team killers. I'd rather have a guy who will run around and run sets really well than a guy who can score. I'd rather have JJ Redick than Jamal Crawford, if that makes sense. Like, just because, like, Jamal Crawford, he'll go get you a bucket and ISO, but, like, I don't know if I want that all the time. I'd rather have a guy who's going to fit in better. And when you have, like, 4 guys like that, now the mitigant to that is, well, they have Doc Rivers. And so Doc Rivers, like, he's someone who, I mean, coaching, I guess, still matters. Like, we've gone this long and haven't talked about coaches at all. Like, but having Doc Rivers, how important is that going to be against Frank Vogel, who had some success in Indiana. He was pretty terrible in Orlando. I think, we always forget to mention how bad he was in Orlando, but he's had a little bit of playoff success. So, like, Todd, Eli, both of you, former coaches, how much are you putting stock into having Doc Rivers, though?
You can take it, Eli.
I put a lot of stock into that because I think he's an excellent set play creator. You know what I mean? Just out of timeouts or whenever. That's one thing he's well known for is that he's always been able to get you with quick hit plays. So I think that matters a lot, especially when you're talking about this specific issue, where you have a lot of ball stoppers, but because, he's someone who can demand that kind of respect and kind of get guys to buy in, I think in, situations where they need to, he certainly can get guys to, like, run through sets and get guys to move without the basketball. I think, Kawhi and Paul George certainly can play and can move off the ball, when instructed to. I think Lou Williams is probably the biggest ball stopper out of those 3. But,
Marcus Morris is a terrible ball stopper.
Yeah, Marcus Morris really, in any set that you're drawing up, should only be setting screens. But, so – I think that certainly matters, in regards to that concern. But that's a valid point is that, I think this team really could have used someone like a JJ Redick or some kind of, like, sniper that moves without the basketball and creates some kind of motion for you where you're not even totally relying on just set plays, you know what I mean? Yeah. Where you're just kind of freelancing. You have at least one guy who's constantly moving off the screens and forcing breakdowns in the defense. They don't necessarily have that, but I think Doc Rivers can kind of mask that with his ability to draw up great sets.
Yeah, I think that, like, if we're, taking it coach by coach, I think the Clippers have a more experience. I probably not even more experience, but just a coaching staff you'd probably want. You'd take over the Lakers. But I think that in this setting, I think that these teams already kind of have the established culture so far. They're probably not going to switch up the sets too much, I would imagine. They're still going to run the same stuff they've been running all year. And I think that, Vogel is good enough. They have Lakers have Jay Kidd and Lionel Hollins. And I think that ultimately LeBron too, which is maybe, the best player coach we've ever seen. But So I think that I don't know. I think obviously the coaching, I think it matters most to kind of get that culture set and all this stuff. But I think that when it comes down to this time, it's definitely a plus. I'd rather have Doc Rivers than Vogel, but I don't think in this setting and necessarily right now that's not going to be the factor that really pushes, the series.
Yeah. Reggie Jackson is another ball stopper they have.
Yeah.
That's a problem for me. Like,
it is.
That's a problem for me. Like, maybe
and you got someone like Caruso on the other side that him and LeBron have the best like 2-man numbers on the court in like the whole NBA.
Caruso, my cousin. That's a great example. Like I'm just saying, like maybe I value it more than other people do, but like I don't do the ball stopping thing. Like, get him off my team. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Clippers obviously have their concerns. We'll see, how that turns out for them throughout these 8 games. But I think we should close out Tier 1 with the Bucks, best record in the league, led by probably the MVP. I don't know if Todd disagrees or not. We haven't really talked with him about that.
It's probably going to happen.
But, number 1 team in the East, number 1 team in the league record-wise, yet probably like the third favorite, at least on our panel. I think Vegas actually has them above the Lakers from the last thing that I saw from ESPN. But how are we feeling about the Bucks? Scale of 1 to 10. Todd, what's your confidence rating in the Bucks making it to the finals?
I'd say I'd give them somewhere between an 8 and a 9, probably a 9. I think there's a chance that they could get into the finals. Yes, I think an 8 or 9. I don't know, man. I think this team is historically great. They have a historically great. Their best player on their team had one of the best years ever. I think that Giannis came back slinging that thing. I don't know. I think that if he's taking that shot, I think even if he shoots low, 30, maybe high 20s or something, I think that could be the difference that this year that maybe he wasn't doing last year. I think that this team just all around is fantastic. They don't have a lot of holes, and I think it comes down to, do we trust Giannis to be able to, if they do the quote-unquote wall, or these other teams like maybe Philly or the Raptors that have these big bodies, can they overcome that? But I think something that we kind of forget is that, the Bucks really, really are just, I'm sorry, so complete. I think that basically I trust Giannis enough to get them there, and I don't see the top level of any of those Eastern Conference teams being able to reach that.
Yeah, probably. But here's the thing. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, they're one of the best regular season teams we've ever seen this year. Historically, they were a historically good regular season team. You look at the PR, point differential, all that shit. Like, they were unbelievable. And Giannis was unbelievable. By the way, Todd, you have Giannis as MVP? Just quickly. Shit. Oh, boy. Oh, no.
Yeah, he is. I guess. Yeah, he is. He got it.
Probably. If LeBron had another 15, 20 games, maybe he would have. Maybe he would have
different. But yeah, he got it.
Yeah. So Giannis is the MVP back to back. Like, he is better than he was last year, even though he didn't learn how to shoot, and that was the big thing. Is like, when Giannis learns how to shoot, it's going to be unbelievable. But he didn't learn how to shoot. He got a little bit worse at it, and he's still better. And the Bucks are better. But it's the supporting cast, right? Like, how often do we see this with a guy, especially a young guy, who's carrying the team, and he just doesn't have the pieces around him? Like, who's going to build the wall and make Chris Middleton and Eric Bledsoe beat them, or Brook Lopez shooting from 3 beat them? Like, do you trust any of those guys? I mean, who? So I guess we'll play that game. And Todd, first of all, I just want to say that the Bucks are minus 167. So if your confidence in them is a 9 to make the finals, you should definitely go bet on them. You should definitely place a sizable bet on them. Those are good odds for you if you have a 9 confidence rating. Then let me just say, though, let me ask you this, since you have an 8 or 9 confidence theory. I'm going to list you guys, and you tell me which one you have the give me your confidence level on those guys specifically. Okay? Chris Middleton.
The confidence level in a playoffs, I'd say probably a 6.
Okay, 6 out of 10. Eric Bledsoe. Shouldn't be higher than a 3.
2.
Either Lopez brother. That's what I'm saying. But this is what I'm saying, right? Like, if he's the third guy and my confidence level is that low, Like, I think
All
I'm
right.
worried. I think I'm worried.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think that basically all those twos and all the whatever, Middleton needs to step up. Yeah, I think he's a question mark, but I think they got enough. They have enough solid players that I think they can do it. And I think that look, the Bucks probably get out of the East last year if Kawhi's not there, right? And there's not a Kawhi there waiting for him. There's not a Kawhi there
You're
waiting
asking
for
the
him.
wrong guy. You're asking the wrong guy.
Yeah, maybe. But I just think that you know, at the end of the day, the Giannis is just unguardable. I think against some of these guys, and I think that this is the year that he kind of takes that leap.
Yeah,
but we'll see. I will go place that bet.
And that's the issue and the concern that you have with the Bucks, right? Is that there is a formula to stop Giannis or slow him down, especially in the playoffs when things get more physical. And then, like you said, how much confidence do you have in his second, third, fourth options? You know what I mean? Yeah. And Brook Lopez was actually pretty bad from three this year, and that's really all he does is kind of spot up from the three. He shot like under 30%. So I think in the playoffs that needs to be near 40 really for them to win a title. To get out of the East, that needs to go up to like 35 because I think a lot of teams are going to collapse on him and say Brook Lopez, we'll live with Brook Lopez threes or Eric Bledsoe threes, and that's where the concern comes in for me is that as good as like Eric Bledsoe is as like on the ball, he's not. That's not his role, you know what I mean? Like he's not the go-to guy, and he's certainly not a catch-and-shoot guy.
Yeah.
So he's not necessarily a great fit with Giannis. He's an okay fit, I would say. But like you said, your confidence level when it comes down to, late in games, we're doubling Giannis or pinching and digging on him when he drives and forcing him to kick no matter what. I don't have a ton of confidence in Eric Bledsoe knocking down shots. Maybe even if Chris Middleton is knocking down shots. Okay, well, you can say, all right, we're not going to leave Middleton, but someone else is going to have to make shots. And that's where it gets into, kind of a scary place for the Bucks, and you could possibly see another collapse. My confidence in them is not nearly as high as far as them making it to the finals because I think there's a lot of wild cards in the East and in the tier 2 level, which we'll get to, who match up well with them. And do have the personnel to defend Giannis at least enough, to where late in games they can force other guys to beat them. So
yeah,
it's certainly going to be it's going to come down to how well Chris Middleton plays. Like if Chris Middleton takes that step forward, he was an all-star this year. I think if he continues he had a good regular season. I think if he plays that well in the playoffs, that should be enough to get them out of the East. As long as Eric Bledsoe isn't god awful or Brook Lopez isn't god awful, I think it should be just enough to get them out of the East in that case.
Yeah, but here's my thing, and whatever, get out of the East, maybe they can. I think that there probably are the favorite, right? And I think that says more about the other teams in the East not having that star, kind of like Todd said. But to win a title, they have better odds than the Lakers. I just can't reconcile that in my own head. Because when you look at this, just NBA history, right? And people talk about the big three, and we talk about super teams or one spectacular guy, but look all throughout NBA history, the entire thing. It's always you got to have two guys. You got to have two guys from Kareem and Oscar, or I should say Lou Alcindor and Oscar, then to Kareem and Magic and Bird and McHale, and then Isaiah and Dumars. Isaiah probably was the one who did it mostly by himself, but Dumars was really solid. And then, Jordan didn't win until he got Pippen, and Kobe and Shaq, and Duncan and Parker and Ginobili, and all of this the whole way through. Even the Heat with LeBron and D Wade. And when they won, D Wade was really really good, and then D Wade got really bad really quick, and then they lost, right? They got killed. And then this is how it goes. You always need that second guy. I would argue okay, who is if I just look back at every team in NBA history, and I looked at every NBA champion, and I said, which one of these teams had a second best player on the team who was worse than Chris Middleton? I'm not saying Chris Middleton's bad. He's an all-star player. But like I just said, like look at all these teams. Who has a second player as bad as Chris Middleton? I don't know if I can find one. Really, I don't know if I can find one.
2011 Mavs, maybe the closest.
No, not really though. I mean, but Terry I think was better, and they had a better all around group as well. Even if you looked at just the group as a whole outside of it, and you just said the second best player is as good as Middleton, and then the rest of the guys are better.
Yeah.
I don't think I could find anyone as bad as Middleton.
Yeah,
I would say
So maybe they get out of the East.
if you're talking, well, I think Chris Middleton is better than Jason Terry just because from the defensive standpoint. But I would agree that like when you're looking at all right, who's the next best player, like Jason Terry and Chris Middleton are in the same tier.
And we all agree that the Mavs are an outlier, though, right? Like
they are. Well, that's why they only won it once.
Exactly, they only won it once, and they were a team we didn't expect to win it. And when we look back at like the teams that we didn't expect to win it and made a great run, they're one of the teams we always mention.
Right. Yep. So wholeheartedly agree. That's where you know what I mean. Unless Chris Middleton has like a crazy playoff run, you know, and honestly, Jason Terry did have a very, very good finals in that series. So, you know what I mean? If they can get something like that out of Chris Middleton, but like you said, they were also deeper, you know what I mean? Because then they had Sean Marion, they had Jason Kidd, who he was older, but like still, you know, extremely efficient. Tyson Chandler, you know.
Defensive force, JJ Barea.
Yeah, but someone who JJ Barea was excellent in that playoff run. So
still balling.
You know what I mean?
Still balling.
Yeah, so you know, I've had the Mavs supporting cast was certainly better. Even if you want to debate Jason Terry and Chris Middleton, they're in the same tier, like of caliber players. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then that supporting cast was better. So you're right. You know, it would take something pretty magical, I think, for the Bucks to, you know, beat out either the Lakers or the Clippers in that case. So I don't have a ton of confidence. My confidence in them coming out of the East alone is like a 6.5 or a 7, but I don't have any confidence in them winning it all, even after that. So
I just think the pressure that Giannis puts on I mean, they had like a historically great season, and I think that cast, like maybe they don't have some of the names, but I think first of all, Budenholzer is one of the best, probably like top 3 coaches in the league. And he has them clicking on all cylinders, or had them clicking on all cylinders. And I think that Giannis, they call him for a freak for a reason. So I don't know. Well, I think they do have some question marks, but I don't know. I think Middleton, I think the size he brings, I think that is going to be big.
Like Middleton?
I mean, I don't like Middleton, but I think he is like, he's in a weird tier of players, but I think he's a legit second best player on a championship team, and I think like that. I can see that for him. I think
he's third. He's Chris Bosh, right?
Maybe, but I think that this could happen. I just think I'm just scared of the Bucks. Like when I think of who I wouldn't want to face, I think the Bucks just slash you and slash you and slash you, and they got the shooters, and they got probably the most dominant player in the league right now. Yeah,
if they're clicking like the regular season, they're definitely. It'll be tough to beat them.
And we'll see. And I think the weird part of all this bubble stuff, like I said earlier, will come down to shooting. Like at any point, guys haven't played real basketball in a couple months. Legs got to be under them. They're playing more games and less amount of rest. And at any point, this could be the weirdest playoffs ever, or it could go exactly how we're thinking right now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for our Tier 1 teams, Lakers, Clippers, and Bucks. So we're going to take a quick break and get back to you guys with Tier 2. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can find the other video under the All In Podcast playlist on our channel. So you can head on over to there. We're going to talk about the Heat, Rockets, Raptors, Nuggets, Sixers, Celtics, and Jazz in the next upcoming video. And so we'll take a quick break and see you guys then.
With the NBA playoffs coming back, something we're going to be seeing a lot is every player's fresh new cut. But you know what else needs a fresh new cut? Your lawn. That's why you should hit up Tavon's Lawn Care. Tavon's Lawn Care LLC is a Black family-owned business located in York, Pennsylvania. Tavon's Lawn Care, or TLC for short, since they provide each job with tender love and care, has been in business for over 10 years. Founded by owner Tavon Parker, TLC aims to provide employment for underprivileged youth while providing great service at a reasonable rate. Visit Tavon's Lawn Care LLC or Tavon's Lawn Care on Facebook and Instagram to view their portfolio and request your cost-free quote today.